Hi and welcome back. In the last lesson, you learned the ins and outs of supplemental line items. In this lesson, we'll be covering common targeting criteria that we will need to plug into DFP. After the campaign has pushed to DFP and you've checked to make sure all line items have pushed through correctly, you will need to look at the media plan in KM to find the site list and launch discussion details in order to find the targeting criteria. First, we will come into our launch discussion to look at what targeting criteria the account manager has listed. So here we're in KM and you will see this is the launch discussion post, so it has all the details that are necessary for the campaign. You will notice that this says targeting right there. So that way it lists out every targeting criteria that we'll need in order to make sure this is a successful campaign. Next, we will go into DFP to make sure the format, geo, and site list all push through correctly. To ensure the approved site list pushed through correctly, cross-reference the media plan tab by placement to make sure they match. So here, as you'll see, we're back still in KM. This is the media plan tab now. So we're going to use the interstitial as an example. So here you can click on the placement. Once you click on the placement, you'll see the line items that are associated to that placement. Now, in order to see the approved site list per line item, we'll click on the line item itself and it will populate all the sites that are approved for this specific line item. So that way, again, you can cross-reference this list with what's in DFP. So here in DFP, this is our interstitial line item, and we'll scroll down and you'll notice it says add targeting. All of the targeting criteria that either pushes through automatically or that you'll need to manually add will be living in this section of DFP per line item. So first of all, here's our site list that pushed through automatically. And again, you're going to cross-reference this site list with what we saw in KM to make sure they match. Most of the time, the site list does push through correctly, but best practice is always to double check because you never know if there is a couple sites here and there that might not be right. Next, we will look at geo. When we target by geo, you could target by DMA, designated market areas, which basically means they only want impressions served in or around these cities. Example, Chicago metropolitan area. Or we can target by city, which is targeting only to that specific city. Targeting by city will result in a smaller audience than DMA. So for example, here in our launch discussion notes, it says California. So we're only going to want to target to the state of California. So going back into DFP, you will notice when it pushes through, it will usually just be United States that pushes through, so we will need to manually update this. And to do so, you're just going to go to the left-hand side and you're going to click on Geo. Once you click there, you're going to just click on United States and you can start typing in California. Once you find California, you're going to want to include, which it already is, so I'm not going to be able to, but you want to include it so it's there. Just to note, as you see this exclude, that would be if we wanted to target nationally, but exclude California, Iowa, and Ohio, you're able to do so. So just again, as an example. Now, to get a little more granular, if the client said they want to target to only Los Angeles, then you can come back in here. You can just type in Los Angeles, and you will see you can just target to the city of Los Angeles. And you, again, would want to include that only. Now, if they want to target to the Los Angeles DMA, you'll scroll down and look for Los Angeles, California DMA region. So that way you're targeting to the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Once we have checked over and made sure everything pushed through correctly, we will need to go back to the launch discussion notes in KM to see what other targeting criteria is needed. These will most likely need to be plugged in manually. So let's go back to discussion notes, and let's start with GrapeShot. GrapeShot is a tool that allows us to contextually target based on keywords that are on the page. When setting up GrapeShot in DFP, we will go to the targeting section. This will be listed as GS. Once you select this, you will always want to start any key value as a tilde. From there, you will want to go back to the launch details to find the GrapeShot ID, which is always a word. So for example here, as you see, here's the GrapeShot, and the ID is StarCom anti-targeting. So now that we know that, we'll go into DFP, we'll come to our key value, again on the left-hand side, and as you'll see, this is already there, but if it wasn't, you can just exit out of this whole thing, and I'm going to add a key value. Now again, GrapeShot will always start GS, and you always are going to want to choose GS channels all. Once you select that, you're going to come into here and you're going to type in the keyword. So again, I said it's StarCom anti-target. So I will just start typing anti-target, and then I will be able to know which one it is. As you see here, it says StarCom anti-target. Again, it always needs to have this tilde in front of it. So once I select that, you're going to be good to go, but please note there is this is or there's is not. So basically, if you want to target to this group, you will want to choose is. If you want to target away from this group, you want to choose is not. So for this scenario, for StarCom, we always want to target away from them, so we're going to choose is not. Once you select that, I always like to double check that it looks correct here on the right-hand side. So it says GrapeShot is not StarCom anti-target. Again, it's going to target away from StarCom. Next, we have our format. This also automatically pushes through. Best practice is to double check that it pushed through correctly. As you see here, since you know it's correctly pushed, it has int, because this is an interstitial line. So again, as I mentioned prior, we want to make sure that tilde will be in front of it. So in case it didn't push through correctly, you would type in int, you would see that has the tilde, select it, you come back down here, and you see the format is int for interstitial. It's also important that this pushes through properly or is set up properly so it renders properly on the publisher's sites. Next, we have crux. Crux segments are used to target a specific audience. You will manually need to set this up in DFP by breaking the placement out into two lines, one labeled crux and one labeled contextual. Please make sure to add the naming convention at the end of the line item name. While you do this, please note there is an 80-20 split rule in terms of the impression goal. 80% of the impressions will go to the contextual line and 20% will go to the crux line. To further explain, the crux line will have the crux segments applied at the key value level. With that said, you will want to go back to the discussion launch details to find the crux segment IDs. Once the segments have been applied, it is important to note the crux line will always run ROK, run of cargo. This is important because we need to run on as much inventory as possible. You will notice a lot of the time, if not most, these lines do not pace well due to these segments having very low scale associated to them. When it comes to the contextual line, you will always be running against the approved site list that the AM provides in KM. So to go back and show you an example, so back in the discussion notes, you'll see here it says crux, and this will only run on the interstitial placement only. So here's our two crux segments that we're going to need to apply to the crux line item. So to go into DFP, you will see I have both line items broken out. So one's labeled contextual at the end and one's labeled crux. First, we'll look at the contextual line. So we'll open this up, and you will see that here I have 80% of the impression goal going to this line. Next, you will also make sure that the site list here matches the approved site list back in the media plan tab of KM. Once you have that set up, you're going to go back and you're going to do the same thing now with the crux line. You're going to make sure once this opens that you have 20% of the impression goal going to this line. Then you're also going to want to make sure that this is going to run against ROK, run of cargo. So that's every site that we can run against this interstitial line. If you notice the crux line is not moving, you can always reach out to your AM or salesperson for approval to shift more of the impressions into the contextual line. Lastly, and/or statements. You will see this in the targeting section of DFP. So going back here to key values, you see this for, even down here, you see it says and. We will always want to select and unless told otherwise. You now know how to properly target within DFP.